I've done quite a bit of traveling over the years, and I've seen many airports and been in different situations. And I think you're not always aware of the influences that are around you that subtly influencing your consciousness. But all of the various senses that give input into us are subtly, our thoughts are affected by that. Our state of consciousness is affected by our outward environment. And of course, this is a basic principle that we're taught on the path of yoga, and that environment is stronger than willpower. And so we should pay attention to our environment and use our environment as a helpful aid. And of course, you can't always control your environment. So that to the degree that you can, try to avoid those environments that are going to negatively affect you, and seek out the opposite, those that are going to positively affect you. But one of the environments that we have is the world that we're surrounded in, and the decor and the colors that we find ourselves in. And I can't help but look at this picture behind me, and you see the nice colors in there. They have a subtle influence on our state of consciousness when we find ourselves, let's say, for example, we find ourselves in bright sunny weather, maybe as opposed to it's gloomy, it's dark, it's gray, that sort of thing. Very subtly, we have it, our moods can be affected by that. And I noticed this when I was traveling recently. At the various airports I passed through, I started in San Francisco, and it's a rather utilitarian airport, very functional, clean, nice, but not particularly noticeable, I don't think. But then I came to India, and I began to notice that there was more color and of course that reflects generally, but India is a very colorful place. And I liked it. I thought, oh, this is wonderful. This is great. I feel I'm back in India. I could see the color and the different dress that people would wear, and the colors of the people going on are all around me. And it was noticeable to me because when you go into a new environment, these things you take for granted after a while, but you notice it. But particularly what started me thinking about colors, I had come through the Frankfurt airport. Now, if any of you have been at the Frankfurt airport, it chose a color scheme of three, I think, three basic colors they chose to decorate the airport. And one, black; two, gray; and three, chrome. And those three are dominant in that airport. And you look, and there's hardly any other color. The walls, the upholstery, the floors, the marble on the floors, or something along in that scheme. And I said, I don't know who the architect was here that chose this color scheme, but it's not very uplifting. And it's very mechanical. It's very has a hard feeling to it, mechanistic. And, Germany, stereotypes, I don't like to stereotype things, but sometimes they're apropos. And you think of an engineering situation, and everybody admires German engineering. And you think of a machine, beautiful machines can be beautiful, but nevertheless, they're very much different than something that is maybe more floral. You go to Southeast Asia, and you get these really wild color schemes, and it gives a very different flavor to life. And I thought it might be interesting to speak a little bit about color and how it influences us, and how we might take advantage of that in terms of our own colors that we choose, or perhaps we don't choose. Now, I don't want to say that this color is a good color, that color is a bad color, because that's not true. Because all colors, it's like anything, environments can be positive or negative depending upon how you use them. And even colors like gray, chrome, and black, they have the positive side too. They have a positive, can be seen in that way. And I'm sure that's what the architects were aiming for. But on the other hand, they can also have a somewhat less than uplifting effect, let's say, on one. And I remember when I was a little boy, one of the very first gifts I remember, it was either a Christmas gift or maybe it was a birthday gift. That must have been 5 or 6 years old. So it's a very dim memory. And I got a wonderful gift. And I still remember, I can't remember hardly anything of a gift that was given to me in those days, but I do remember this. I was given a box of crayons, all those different colors. But it wasn't just the little box of the 8, the smallest pack is 8 different colors. This was one of the big packs that must have had 36 colors in it or something. And I just absolutely loved that box of colors and crayons, because I used to like at that age to do coloring books and fill in, the drawings. And I remember all of those colors, and it was just so wonderful to have them. And I just look at them, play with them. And I didn't think anything of it other than the fact that I liked this. But I remember years later, after I met Swami Kriyananda, he was speaking about how he loved color. And he made reference, he said him for himself, he said, I think it was a memory of my past in the astral world. Because the astral world, if a person is conscious in that astral world, in a high astral world, positive, that it's very colorful. The colors are bright and beautiful and uplifting and refreshing and feed our consciousness in a very positive way. And he said that he felt he was attracted in this lifetime to nice colors. And he said he felt there was an astral memory that was with him. Now, when I remember that beautiful gift of colors, the crayons as a boy, but I somewhat was not particularly attracted to colors in general. I lost that attraction for it as you grow up. It didn't influence me. So I didn't think about it too much until I did meet Swami Kriyananda later. And he was, he liked colors. Put it this way, he appreciated nice colors. And he appreciated beautiful objects. He appreciated beautiful things that were tastefully done. And he would often, very interestingly, he would even go up to a stranger. And takes a little audacity in my mind to do that. I would be too shy to do this. But he would sometimes let's say he was in an airport and somebody was sitting there and he would say, I want to say, the shirt you're wearing is very beautiful. I really appreciate that, you wearing that shirt. Thank you. And he would thank the person because that person was wearing something that was attractive. And he didn't feel any hesitancy about just mentioning it to the person. And of course, he didn't say if a person wasn't wearing a beautiful shirt, he wouldn't say anything like that, but that wouldn't have been appropriate. But he would call people's attention to something. Oh, that's and you meet him. He said, oh, you're wearing something very beautiful today. Thank you. And even though it may have not have been a conscious thing. So that awareness, that I mentioned that because it began to impress me with the idea that yes, color does matter. It has an influence on us. And then because it goes along with their teachings that we should choose our influences wisely, why not choose colors wisely? And then thinking about it a little bit further, I began to realize that there are actually healing modalities that use color, that color can change, because it can influence our consciousness a little bit. And I think if we pay attention to it, we can see how color does influence us slightly. You go into a room that's painted a certain color and you feel uplifted. You feel more cheerful perhaps, or you feel cold, you feel, and it's, there's not something. Think about lighting. They make light bulbs, fluorescent light bulbs, or even your incandescent light bulbs are different colors, hard white, cool white, they call one of them. It's got a little bit of a bluish tinge to it. Most people get kind of, it doesn't feel so friendly. Then you got warm white. It's got a little bit more yellows in it. And if you're going to be in a work environment, maybe you want to think about your lighting. And do you get, or even think in terms of does sunlight come into your room, and what is it bouncing off the walls? How is that affecting you? And you can find that if you become sensitive to it, you can change your mood simply by some external means like that. Just in the same way that we realize that sound, music, for example, obviously, affects us. Well, color does too. And of course, the things you have in your environment, what you're looking at, do have that influence on us. And so why not choose something? And so there are people who make a study of this sort of thing. Years ago, when I was and many years ago, I worked in an office and there was mostly ladies in the office. And my birthday, for one birthday, they pooled their resources and they gave me a gift certificate to go to a color consultant for my wardrobe. Now, I took it as a subtle hint, you might say, that I was not color coordinated, and they didn't say that, but that was I think the message. Hey, you could, So I went to the color consultant, and the color consultant said, "Oh, you need to wear because of skin tone, or I don't know, maybe it's my aura. We do maybe have this aura around us, various colors, whatever. You should pick up. Why don't you?" Again, she gave me a palette of material. Say, well, pick in this palette for this sort of article of clothing and versus that and so on. And I did that for a while, and I don't know if it affected other people or me, but it was fun. And but I did agree. I have to admit, I didn't stick with it for a very long time, but I did try a little bit. But it was fun, and I do think that there is something to it if one puts one's attention to it. But certainly, I do. The broader principle of color is something that might be worthwhile giving some attention to. Now, but what is color? Color is basically it's different frequencies of vibration. And we are subtly influenced by vibration, sound vibration. You might say those, oh, I'm not in tune with that person's vibration. Those are whatever vibrations that is being spoken of. But vibrationally, we ourselves emanate a certain vibration, whether that's a physical thing or a psychic thing. And in the same way, they speak of there's astral, you could say, as our aura vibrates, our consciousness vibrates in various colors in various ways. And it's just merely vibration. Blue vibrates at a certain frequency compared to infrared, red at the opposite ends of the spectrum. And so it makes sense because we are sensitive to vibration, physical vibration, sound vibration. Why not light vibration also? We can be subtly, our consciousness on a below the conscious level can influence us. And so it makes sense that color being different vibrations can influence us. I have a naturopathic healer friend who has a clinic in America, and she was curing various diseases. There's a color therapy where you can put little laser colors in the veins of your arm, and it emits there's a tiny little laser hooked up to this machine that emits certain vibrational colors of various frequencies. And the idea being that the blood passing over this colorful laser insert, it kills certain microbes in the blood, or it affects it somehow. And it's been tested to say, and apparently it actually has some real effect. I know people who have had that sort of treatment done and reported good results for certain specific diseases. And So you could see that we're influenced. So let's explore some of these colors a little bit. Now, I want to say something just right off the bat about that is there's not a good color or bad color. We're talking about color in general here, and it's like anything. Circumstances, they say, are neutral. It's what you make of the circumstance, whether it's good or bad. And so consequently, certain things can be, a vibration can be very helpful and if we take it in a certain way, and perhaps it can be unhelpful at other times. And you could say that, and each individual, depending, it might even be during the day, we resonate with certain things at certain colors more than other colors. But yet there is a more universal influence that I think we need to, we are subject to. Now, Swami Kriyananda, he was, because he had interest in this and he had interest in colors, and he thought about himself, and based also upon what Paramhansa Yogananda said about colors. And he said one of the points is, although colors have their positive and negative side, he said it's best if we're going to use colors, let's say in clothing, how we wear colors, influence our colors. He said, try to use pure colors. Don't use muddy colors, is the way Swamiji would put it. Colors that are kind of distorted from their, you might say, you look at the rainbow, those are nice pure colors, but you can mix in and make them darkened and muddy. And he said those colors usually don't have an uplifting positive effect of what, whereas if you want to use color for a positive, use more pure colors. And their bright colors have a little bit more influence than muted colors, but there's all different shades within there. And I think each person individually has to find what resonates with them. It's a little bit dangerous to make broad paintbrush statements about these things, but each of us need to test for ourselves. Now, he did say that the colors within ourselves that, that we own, you might say through our aura of how we astrally vibrate, in a consciousness that is very sattvic and you might say pure, they radiate more brightly. And when we say pure, what is it that obscures a bright color and makes it muddy? Well, it's egotism. The influence of ego, self-centeredness, you could say, is what obscures the brightness of a color and muddies its radiance. And so think of that. If you want to purify the color that our color, whatever that might be, make it nice and radiant. How to do that? Well, you can put clothing on, but even better yet is put the clothing of your attitude. Proper attitude is the best way to purify your color. And because, there's colors associated, which is a little bit too large of a topic to get into today, associated with the various chakras and so on, to be able to cleanse those chakras and purify those chakras and purify the colors that we radiate. The way to do that is not some magical mantra. The way to purify our chakras is to have the right attitude. And a positive attitude, a clean attitude is what purifies and awakens those chakras and awakens the color within them more so than anything other than we can do any yogic exercise. The best yogic exercise is to be positive, energetic, enthusiastic. And then we find that we radiate nicely. Now, just in the time allowed for us, I'd like to just talk about a few of the specific colors. And these are ones that Swami Kriyananda, I took these from his book, Living Wisely, Living Well. If you go there, yeah, I think that's the book. And, or is that, yeah, I think that's the book. Anyway, that You can find this written in there, somewhere in there. But this is a general principle that he would speak of. And he said, so if you take some of these colors, think about two. I'll start with two specifically, because he did mention this in terms of, you see here, I'm wearing this blue. And Swami began what he Swami order, Nayaswami order, some years ago, and chose the color blue as the color for the renunciate order of the Swami order that he began. And he was asked a question and he addressed it right off. He says, why not? Why differ? Because traditionally the color is a geru, the orange ochre color. And he says, why a different one? He says, well, because Swami wore that color for many, many years as a Swami. And he said, it's a fine color. No, there's no, he says, but he had wanted to start the Swami order, Nayaswami order. He says it's an expression of a new age of Dwapar that we've entered into. And to affirm that, he said, he felt it was better to use a different color to affirm as the difference between the age from which we came out of into the age we're moving into. And he says, Geru, that orange color, he says, it's the color of fire, and it's the color that affirms the renunciation in terms of destroying desires, destroying attachments, freeing ourselves from any of those worldly influences. And it's it's a wonderful color, and it affirms that cutting of those ties. But of course, he said, we want to do that for sure. He says, but blue, he said, in the age, he said he preferred, because it was more his consciousness, and also the consciousness of Paramhansa Yogananda, was not to focus so much of cutting the ties and rejecting, you could say, worldliness, as affirming samadhi. Affirming is the way he said it. Blue is samadhi affirming. It's affirmative of expansion. It's affirmative of calmness. It's affirmative of, you could say, the Christ or Krishna consciousness within us. And so it has more of that positive application to the spiritual path, rather than, you might say, the rejection of worldliness. It's same thing, but two different ways of looking at it. And of course, like any color, orange is that color of willpower, that color of fire, which every one of us needs in order to be successful on the spiritual path. We must have that flame. And so it's a wonderful color to use to inspire us to take up our sword and fight the battle of life and reject those things that are holding us back. So it's a wonderful color for that. But of course, because it's will affirming, it also has the drawback in its negative application. It can feed the ego as well. And so you have to, whenever you're using will, is it self-ego will, or is it attuning to God's will, you see? And so consequently, it can be ego affirming if it's used in the wrong way, unconsciously. And so that was interesting. Whereas blue, again, to a little bit, going into a little bit deeper, is blue is expansive and particularly calming. And I think people have a subtle understanding there. Is the blue has sort of, it's sort of calming. I think that's the good word. And it's a very good color for meditation. And of course, there is the blue is a color associated with the spiritual eye, and going into the blue, the deep blue of expansiveness and samadhi. It's associated with that. So but it also, you have to realize that blue has its negative side. What might that be? Well, I've sort of alluded to it already. Blue can be cold. And emotionally, blue can be cold. The person, I'm very spiritual, and they're blue, but they have no heart. They have no feeling. They lack devotion, perhaps. So you have to have, if you're going to use colors of blue, you want to, if you're attracted to blue, which I like blue, it's attractive to me. It wants to not be a cold blue, because that may inspire that cold side of the blue in terms of our emotional approach to life. Make it a little bit more warmth of blue that's brings that element out, that doesn't accentuate the negative side, but perhaps opens it up to the positive side. So, of course, if you're thinking of emotions, it brings up the thought of red. Now, do we even have this saying, "Oh, I saw red"? In other words, they became emotional, angry. "Oh, I just saw red when something happened." It's associated with that very high emotion, or it's associated with lustfulness or anger, and so consequently, in spirituality tradition, there's a tendency to reject red. Oh, I don't want, to wear red. You're just stimulating the emotions. You're stimulating the senses. Now, of course, that's true. It can do that. It can stimulate that. But on the other hand, you do have to say that red has a lot of energy. So consequently, a person who is lethargic, has no energy, a little bit of red in their life would be a good thing. And it's interestingly, it's often said that if you're going to use red, don't paint your whole house red. I think a person instinctively knows that if all of their walls are red, that's going to be a little bit much. But highlights of red brings out energy. And you could try that in China. Red is considered good luck. So you'll see lots of things that are that red color. A door might be red, or certain elements in the environment are painted red just to bring out energy. And they associate that with good luck, positiveness. Think of, and so red can be associated with positive emotions as well. Cheerfulness, for example. Remember how Paramhansa Yogananda said each fruit resonates with a certain quality, and cherries were associated with cheerfulness. A life is a bowl of cherries, or as you might say, there's a saying like that. And it's that cheerfulness that can be very positive. And so consequently, but if you even look at red, you can see the spectrum there. There's a cheerful red, and then there's that darker blood red, which kind of, you can feel the sense of, that's not so good. So choose your colors, but that to be, but if you're feeling a need for energy, take a cheerful red and add a little bit to your environment. Make little highlights here and there, and you find it can be helpful. Now, another color that's very much used is yellow. And interestingly, because I think it's more than one culture associates it, these are things that are not, we might think this is just very culturally based, but some of these things like red, for example, are cross-cultural. It's just as we are made, not just as we're nurtured by our culture, and I think red is like that. Yellow often in many cultures associated with wisdom, with insight. A person, intellectuality is creativity even can be associated with yellow. But you can see again, if you look at yellow and the spectrum of yellow, you can have a yellow that's bright, has a certain bright, brings out the light in the yellow. And then you can have the other end of the spectrum where it's very like mustardy, and it starts to go into the green a little bit, you see. And that can be, it's not so nice. And sometimes people will be wearing colors. Once you start thinking about colors, then you start looking around at what people are wearing. And you kind of look and say, whoa, that, it just, was not conscious. I remember giving a class like this once to a large audience, and I was just rolling along, giving a very graphic examples. And then to my embarrassment, I looked in the front row and there was a lady there. And I just described a terrible color. And she was dressed exactly in that. And I thought, oh boy, I put my foot in my mouth in a figuratively speaking by that. And I felt very bad about that. So we don't want to go around judging others and judging, and like that. So be careful about that. But nevertheless, for ourselves, try to bring out those aspects of the color that are the positive side of it. Stained glass windows are beautiful. All colors in a stained glass window, when they're bright, are beautiful. And so intellectuality is yellow, but if it's not pure, it can have that little bit of, you might say, sickening effect, is the way Swamiji said it. It's a sickening effect on the mind. And because it is associated with, yellow is associated with the mind. And speaking of sickening effect, that brings us to color green. And green is really a mixture. What is it? It's a mixture of yellow and blue as the two primary colors. And it's associated with health. I think this is many cultures associated that way. And I suspect that's because we're surrounded by green vegetation, growth, new growth in the spring comes out, the new leaves come out and with the bright green, and it's inducive of the thoughts of vitality and well-being, a sense of well-being. And so there again, green can be associated with health, it's associated with harmony, and so you can sort of stimulate that consciousness through that color. But of course, there again, you could have some very unpleasant shades of green as well. And now, isn't it interesting that certainly in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, English tradition, green is associated with jealousy. Now, why that should be, I'm not exactly sure, but it's jealousy and envy are obviously mental ill health. And so there again, green has both ends of the spectrum. Now, color that Swami Kriyananda liked, and he would sometimes, at one point in some years, he was very much attracted. He liked to wear sort of an indigo violet color, and he said it's. I still remember he had a very nice silk shirt that was of that color. He would sometimes wear, when he was not wearing clothes associated with sannyas. And he said violet is associated with high thoughts, noble aspirations, or indigo with pure feelings, a love of beauty. And he said the positive side of that was if it's a nice color of that, a nice violet color, it can be very positive that way. But he said also, though, unfortunately, the negative side of that is it can be considered to be a person who is highly attracted to violet and those colors can also, he noticed an association with unrealistic, untethered to being practical, too idealistic, and not, you might say, savoring one's association with the practical world, too up in the clouds, you might say. And but it does have a positive side of it, gets us out of our emotions and out of our material side. So it's an elevated consciousness, but we have to keep ourselves tethered to the realities in which we live in. Now, two other colors that are interesting is white and black. And I mentioned black of the Frankfurt Airport color scheme. Well, it has a positive side, and there are certain religious orders in the Christian tradition, Catholic tradition, that do wear black. And it's austere. But in a monastic tradition of austerity, affirmation of the traditional austerity of monasticism, it can be reinforcing to that. It's associated with non-attachment, to not be attached to things of this world or not be attached to the senses, which are implied through a colorful exterior environment. And so non-attachment, austerity. It's also associated with infinity, the sense of the night sky. It's very, the deep, infinite vastness of space. It can be associated with that and be very attractive in that way. And it has a certain, I don't know, maybe it's a martial firmness, you might say, that sometimes people are attracted to that, but that can also be lacking in feeling as well. And we can darken our feelings, eliminate our feelings, and that might be the negative side. So perhaps those monastics that are attracted to the black color, they have to be careful to not allow it to see the world through that lens of no feeling, because it's not, spirituality is overcoming, you could say, the negative side of feeling, but not feeling itself. We have to be able to feel in order to be able to experience. Consciousness itself is feeling, but we have to have the positive side of feeling, not the coldness of non-feeling. And then you have white, which is basically white in the physical realm, is the blend of all colors. It's all colors of the rainbow are white. But then you break them out in the you see the spectrum when you pass light through a prism, it breaks it out into the individual colors that make up that. But it's associated traditionally, I think, in many cultures with purity. There's no stain, you could say, to one's consciousness. White would imply that. Of course, white is, in some cultures, is a color of mourning as well. That there is that, but you could say it's associated with non-attachment. The body is gone. The body is, there's no attachment there, no worldly clinging to the world of the senses, which are implied by the individual colors. And if passive, white can induce you might say, a lack of interest in this world. Now, to be non-attached is one thing. To be indifferent may sometimes outwardly look to be the same thing as being non-attached, but it's not. To be indifferent is not, this is a great enemy on the spiritual path, is to be spiritually indifferent. So we are counseled by the spiritual masters, certainly our guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, said, be interested, but not attached. You see, now there's the difference, because be creatively engaged, to be ambitious, to want to do things better and more and better. And it takes a certain amount of interest, not so much in the worldliness, but interested enough to be able to transcend the worldly interest into that. It's that curiosity of wanting to know truth and wanting to know what's behind this outward form that draws us onto the spiritual path often enough. So white can induce a lack of interest. And so Swami would say, he said, don't choose white if your nature is too passive. Because if you're too passive, you probably need a little bit of color. And so you see in all of these colors, whatever it might be, there's a spectrum of possibilities. You go too far one way, too far the other. And according to our situation, our consciousness at any one time, we can use them or perhaps avoid them to our benefit. And I think eventually, of course, even this, to be conscious of colors, to be thinking about it, the danger here is we begin to become too obsessed with externals. Oh, am I wearing the right color today? Is my tie the right shade of this? And we don't want to do that. This is something I mentioned this, not that we should obsess over these things or take them too seriously, but just one, to have fun, just to have fun with it. Two, because it can be useful. And I think mostly because be aware of our influences. And color is just the entry point for this larger topic of choosing our environment wisely. This is the secret of the spiritual path for the devotee who is the seeker, is to recognize that this world around us, through all of the senses, through every influence of the outer world, does influence us. And to imagine that, oh, I'm above it all, I'm not going to be influenced, is not a wise way to proceed. We say, okay, this world is influencing us, but not to be afraid of it. Just recognize it and choose, like the wise ant who can separate the sugar from the sand. And that's how we want to be. We can discriminate and use our environment in a good way, in a way that's going to take us in the direction, but don't worry about it. Don't think, oh, I wore the wrong color today, because that's getting too much over the top. And then you become obsessed with outward things. You want to ultimately transcend. The real color that we want to be aware of is the emanation of holiness that will come naturally to us when we have contact with God. And you could say, if we're look into the spiritual eye and see the colors there of the spiritual rainbow within the spiritual eye, and then go into that and outwardly will radiate that which is right for us. Each of us has our own individual shades of the rainbow with which we proceed and emanate in this life. And it all starts with being a channel and attuning ourselves to those beautiful colors that are within ourselves through contact with the divine. So I hope you found this interesting. Again, don't take it too seriously, but yet be aware that there is an influence, and use it to our advantage. I'm looking at my questions here, and one of them was, can you explain the colors of robes the Nayaswami's chart monks, our teachers, wear for Ananda, and why? And I think I did address that a little bit right at the first. Blue has, Swami wanted to use blue because he felt that it reflected, it was samadhi affirming, is what he was saying. And of course, blue, you look into the spiritual eyes I'd made mention, and some of you perhaps have been graced to be able to see those colors. It's a ring of gold surrounding a field of blue. And the blue is representative of the Christ consciousness, the Krishna consciousness. And in the middle of that is a white star in there. And Yogananda said these were his colors, the colors that he painted his temples, and he liked to include in his environment was gold, blue, and white. And it's a nice combination. And of course, that's, you might say, behind the thinking that Swami Kriyananda applied and brought to using the color blue as affirming of spiritual consciousness, affirming meditation, and affirming the aspiration towards samadhi and merging into the Krishna consciousness.